opponents, and that is by defeating him in this election on November 8th. We have asked a number of amazing Texans to be here today to tell their story to you, to make sure that we understand the cost and the consequence of Greg Abbott being in office and why it is so important to defeat him and to ensure that going forward, women in Texas can make their own decisions about their own body, their own future, and their own health care. The first person that you're going to hear from is Elizabeth. Looking forward to hearing her story as well, and then we'll introduce the other speakers in turn. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Elizabeth Weller. I'm a graduate student of political science at the University of Houston. This year, me and my husband found out that I was pregnant. We were very excited because this was a planned pregnancy. But what happened was that at 18 weeks and 6 days, my water had broken. I was rushed to the emergency room where I was told that my amniotic sac had bursted, and I was not going to be able to retain any type of amniotic fluid. I was told that no matter what, whether I chose to continue with the pregnancy or halted it, when I delivered, my baby would be delivered at 18 weeks, 6 days. That is 4 weeks short from the week of viability, meaning that no matter what, when my baby left my body, she would die immediately. There was nothing that anybody could do. The administration at the hospital told me that I was not sick enough at the time that this happened to me, and they sent me home to wait for either my baby to die or for me to incur an infection, in which case I was left to gamble with my life and the health of my uterus, in effect gambling any future prospects of being able to get pregnant again. Therefore, my wishes and my dreams of forming a family with my husband would have been in jeopardy. This situation put me in a position to where I had to risk my life. And this is going to be the reality for any woman in the state of Texas and other states who are approaching abortion laws in a restrictive manner that they are. I was lucky enough to have an ethics committee to rule in my favor within the 4 days. But other women will not have that luxury. Other women are going to be put in a position, in a situation where they will most likely die. This is the future for many women in these states, but it doesn't have to be the future that we are going to look forward to. We can make that change. Texans can make that change. When they come out to the polls, I implore you to vote with your conscience, do what's right, and vote for a new governor to be in this position. Please, vote for Beto O'Rourke, because this is the change that we need. If we want to see change in our states, we cannot continue to vote in the same manner and expect any type of different outcome. So in November, when you come to the polls, I implore you, ladies and gentlemen of Texas, to do the Texan thing. Show up for each other and defend each other's rights and liberties. This is something we can all change, and the responsibility falls on each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We have Claire now.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm an arthritis patient and I'm 26. I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis and uveitis when I was 3 years old. I've been on many medications and treatments in the last 23 years, but I've had the most success with the drug commonly known and commonly used in arthritis called methotrexate. However, methotrexate is also used to induce abortions, usually for ectopic pregnancies. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, arthritis patients like me are concerned about access to methotrexate. Of course, this mainly affects patients who are marked as women in the healthcare system. Some of us are even being denied our prescriptions by doctors and hospitals and pharmacies that fear potential repercussions from states like Texas with strict trigger laws in place, even before these trigger laws went into effect. When I asked my doctor if I would still have access to methotrexate, they said I would because my insurance had covered me for the full year. But when I asked, well, what about next year? What if I change insurance? What if I get a different job? They didn't have any answers for me. All they could say was that I have it for now and that they're going to be adding a pregnancy test to my quarterly standard blood work. These trigger laws are also dangerous because if somebody on methotrexate gets pregnant, access to an abortion is essential. There's a high chance of having a miscarriage or of developing severe birth defects while on this medication. Trigger laws only allow intervention when the mother's life is in danger, and sometimes not even then. The other day, one of my friends with arthritis said that one of their biggest fears is developing sepsis because as arthritis patients, we don't have the immune system to fight infections like sepsis. Are we supposed to wait until we're close to death, until we can get medical care? Are we supposed to suffer the trauma of carrying to term when we know we will deliver stillborn? Some people choose to do this, but that's the point. It should be a choice. When you have arthritis, the choices you have to make with your doctor are really difficult choices. Do you want to do painful injections or nausea-inducing medication? Do you want physical therapy or surgery? But again, these are choices. Choices made between me and my doctor. And we're both willing to take on the responsibility of making these choices. Trigger laws take away our choices while taking on none of the responsibility that comes with them. I've been on methotrexate most of my life, and it's been such an effective treatment that doctors thought I was going into remission when I was about 18, and they began to slowly take me off of it. However, in the months that followed, my uveitis ended up spreading from one eye to the other, and I ended up having to have surgery, and I had permanent vision damage. I ended up being on a higher dose of methotrexate than I was before, and had to add other injections as well. I thought that ordeal was behind me, but thanks to Greg Abbott, I now have to worry about what will happen if I can't get my medication again next year. We should not be denied medications that are proven to work and that have worked for me for over 20 years now. We should not be denied access to an abortion for a pregnancy that we know will not be viable and that we know will harm and endanger us. These trigger laws don't just affect people seeking abortions, they affect people fighting cancer, they affect people with chronic pain, and they affect doctors and pharmacists that just want to provide basic health care to their patients. Abortion is health care.
Thank you, Claire. We've got Dr. Borelli now.
Hi, my name is Lee Barelli. I'm a family physician here in Harris County, and I'm also on the board of an organization called Doctors in Politics. And for the first time, I'm seeing doctors can be a little bit apathetic because we're tired. But for the first time in many years, I'm seeing doctors upset because these situations are very complex. They're very unique. I know my patients. I am a family doctor who takes care of them from adolescence to death. And I know my patients. And my relationship with them and us talking and my female patients making a choice in my exam room should be how we provide healthcare. Greg Abbott is not a doctor. He did not go to medical school and do residency. He does not understand the complexities of healthcare choices. And so for the first time, you're seeing doctors wake up and realize that if we're not in politics, if we don't work to elect somebody like Beto O'Rourke, then we don't get to practice medicine the way we need to, and the way we need to for our patients. One of my really good friends just had her third miscarriage after IVF. She was taking progesterone supplements when on her 8-week ultrasound there was no heartbeat. And she texted me and she said, they've offered me Cytotec or a dilation and curettage. But for the dilation and curettage, they want to put me to sleep with general anesthesia. On just Cytotec, there's a 60% chance that this miscarriage will go through, but a 40% chance that I'm going to have surgery, which could damage my uterus and my ability to have future children. And I said, well, why don't they just give you Miffy, which is the medicine that we use that induces abortion? And she said, well, now, because of Governor Greg Abbott, you have to have a special certificate to provide that medication, and my OB-GYN and my IVF doctor do not provide it. And I said, well, I know that the doctors of Planned Parenthood provide that medication. So she called Planned Parenthood, and they're so terrified of these laws that they said, we don't manage abortions after 6 weeks. I'm sorry, we can't help you. This was before today. And I said, explain to them that it's miscarriage management. It's not an abortion. But the person who's not medical answering the phone is so scared that it's a troll or somebody recording them that they weren't able to help her. Are we really going to put women under general anesthesia for dilation and curettage when we could just give them a pill? That's a lot more dangerous. And are we going to let politicians with no healthcare experience make those decisions for us? I can't believe that in 2022 I even have to be saying any of this. I can't believe that after all the sacrifices we've made as healthcare professionals, I got COVID, and then I got long COVID, and now I have 2 autoimmune disorders, including rheumatoid arthritis like Claire. I can't believe that after everything we've gone through, we're now being told how to practice medicine. That's not the hero's welcome that I was given in 2020. So now I'm an advocate, and I'm in politics, and I am working my butt off to get Beto O'Rourke elected governor of this state so that these decisions can come back to a private conversation between a patient and their doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. We've got Dr. Kumar now.
Hello, good morning. My name is Dr. Bobby Kumar. I'm a family medicine physician. I use he, him pronouns, and I've been an abortion provider in Texas for over 7 years now. For the past year now, since SB 8 went into effect, rather than helping people not be pregnant, I and the amazing staff that I get to work with have been instead forced to help people navigate accessing the same care in another state. It's felt immoral and unethical as people sometimes beg and plead to help them right there in the clinic where we have for decades. I've heard so many people tell me why they can't travel out of state, oftentimes referring to the children they already have at home, referring to the multiple jobs they're navigating so they can provide for their children and keep their lights on and have food on the table. Sometimes I've heard more extreme things from people who have told me traveling for care isn't an option, risking their ability to stay in the country as well as their loved ones being able to remain here if their documentation status were discovered in the process, folks living with an abusive partner who had an extremely difficult time getting to the clinic that day, let alone needing to travel to another state, and folks who tell me about near-death experiences for extremely difficult and medically complex previous pregnancies they know that they can't endure again. Today, with this trigger ban going into effect, we have yet another boulder on our shoulders as healthcare providers as we try to do what we can, which often feels like very little, to care for the people where the state has failed them. The law adds to the chilling and chaos effect we have already been under for the past year, but also the past decade, plus because of countless abortion restrictions. This is not good for the people of Texas, our families, or for public health. And in all of the mess that has been created, we have to remember how inherently classist and racist abortion bans are, as the people most harmed by them are folks of color, especially Black women, who are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth, and poor and low-income folks who are the least likely to be able to afford care, let alone the logistics that come with traveling to another state. After providing care for thousands of people and having had the privilege to hear their stories and helping them try to not be pregnant, it's clear to me that abortion is an act of love, and the people of Texas deserve leadership that understands and respects that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. We've got Leslie L.C. Sims.
Good morning. My name is Leslie Sims. I'm a proud Houstonian and even prouder daughter of immigrants. Because of the structural racism in maternal health care and the state's utter lack of investment in social support to help Black people like me thrive, Black women are at a greater risk of dying and suffering severe complications during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum period. Meaning that in a state, Texas, with one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the world, this state has decided to simultaneously over-legislate and over-criminalize Black women and Black people with uteruses. Within the reproductive justice and reproductive health care, Black women are more than just patients. We are clinic workers, we are doctors, we are abortion funders, we provide practical support, we provide love to our families, we provide care to our community. And we are advocates above all else. I stand here today because this is bigger than abortion rights. This is my ability, my family ability, my community's ability to access affordable, trustworthy, culturally competent medical care for Black people of various gender identities and immigration statuses. Because unfortunately, that type of medical care is just not guaranteed in our state. Our access to insurance, medical health care, family planning is already disproportionately restricted over the last 10 years. Contrary to the belief of many Republican politicians, reproductive health care is a very wide umbrella that affects us at all points of our lives, at all ages. When clinics are forced to close, too many people of color are denied access to medical care, where we see providers that we trust, who may speak our language, who may speak our cultural identity, and we need that. For example, just a small example, Black women like me and other Black people are denied access to equitable care for screenings that are a driving force in the later detection of breast and cervical cancer, because we just have it at a higher rate than white women. Black people like me, like my family, like my friends, like the people I don't know, like the people in this room, we deserve autonomy to make our own healthcare decisions. We deserve the right to decide whether and when to have children, and the right to raise them in environments that are healthy, nurturing, and safe. And I just want to reiterate that. We deserve to live in a state that recognizes our autonomy, that allows us to raise the families that we want, so we can be free of state-sanctioned violence that comes in many forms, including police brutality, as well as restrictive immigration laws. Abortion simply cannot be separated from other social justice issues. They impact our healthcare outcomes, and we are affected every day. It's not a coincidence that as we're over-legislated and over-criminalized, we're also denied access to voting. It's just not a coincidence. Black women like me, Black people like me, we hold true to our bodily autonomy. And I hope and I know that Black people like me will continue to be resilient, but in a state like this that enacts violence to us every day, we shouldn't be forced to be resilient alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a few closing comments, and then we all welcome your questions. I want to thank these extraordinarily courageous Texans for being here. They make me so proud to be in this state, to be raising our children along with my wife Amy in Texas, and to be running to serve the people as the next governor of this great state. I really appreciate what Leslie just said about the connection to this total abortion ban, the most extreme law in the country, with no exception for rape, no exception for incest. The connection between that law and the plight of our democracy and the right to vote in this state. In Texas, 750 polling places have closed down in the last 10 years. That's twice the number of the next closest state, and we are the fastest growing in the union. Most of those poll closures have occurred in the fastest growing Black and brown neighborhoods across the state of Texas. When you all report a line 6 hours deep right outside of Texas Southern University on election night, which I predict you will, we should be overcome by the shame that we visit this indignity on any one of our fellow Texans in what is supposed to be the world's greatest democracy. The point I'm trying to make is that abortion ban with no exception for rape or incest, that is not us. That may be Greg Abbott. It is not the people of Texas. In fact, you all have reported that 82% of Texans, including 76% of Republicans in this great state, oppose his total abortion ban with no exception for rape and no exception for incest. And I'm grateful to everyone who just spoke, who made it very clear that we're talking about the life and death of Texas women. In addition to protecting their freedom, their right to make their own decisions about their own bodies, we are standing here today to protect their lives. As Leslie just told us, we lead the world, or much of the developed world, in the rate of maternal mortality. It is 3 times as deadly for Black women in this state. When over the last 10 years, abortion providers and reproductive health care clinics like this one have been under attack, not only have they foreclosed opportunities for women to seek an abortion in the state of Texas, in many of our underserved and especially rural counties, they foreclosed any opportunity to get a cervical cancer screening, to see a family planning provider, to see a doctor of any kind, literally, in the least insured state in America. These 2 extraordinary doctors who just spoke to you, who are standing behind me right now, laboring under these pressures of being dead last in the country in access to health care, meaning they're seeing far more patients than anyone else is in any other state in the union. And now to have their very government and governor attacking them, they are our heroes at this moment. We've got to have their backs, stand up for them, and win this election. It is literally the only way to overcome this challenge. We must defeat Greg Abbott. Last thing that I want to share with you, and this, I hope, affords us some hope at this moment. 50 years ago, in 1972, abortion was just as illegal in Texas as it is now today. No one from outside of the state came and rode to our rescue. It was the women of Texas. Jane Roe, one of our fellow Texans, and her two attorneys, Sarah Weddington from Abilene, Texas, Linda Coffey, her other attorney who still lives in Dallas today, successfully pled the case for the protection for the right to privacy, to make very personal and very often painful decisions without interference from our government. Roe versus Wade, decided in 1973, was won by the women of Texas. I am confident that in the year 2022, that protection will be won back by the women of Texas. That's what this election is about. We must win in November. And so I ask any Republican, any independent, any Democrat, any person who sat out previous elections, if you care about this issue, you must vote, and we must vote to replace Greg Abbott. With that, very happy to take your questions, and I also want to make sure that I afford everyone the opportunity to ask questions from anyone who just spoke. Their story is so powerful, so compelling. I want to make sure that you're able to ask follow-up questions if you wish.
We start over here. Hi. What will it look like for you if you're voted in as governor when it comes to the process of reversing this ban? What does that look like, the process?
This is KHOU for anybody who can't see over there.
Imagine if for the first time in 32 years since Texas elected Ann Richards, in my opinion, the all-time great to have served in that office, we elect not just a Democrat, but a proudly pro-choice Texan who's going to make sure that we stand up for every woman making her own decisions about her own body and her own future. We will have the ability to work with other members in statewide offices, other members of the legislature, who I want to say very likely could be Democrats. We have an extraordinary Democrat, Rochelle Garza, as pro-choice as they come, running for Attorney General to replace Ken Paxton. Mike Collier running for Lieutenant Governor to replace Dan Patrick. And we have contested state legislative seats across the state of Texas. You will see a referendum on choice and protecting women's ability to make their own decisions. I look forward to working with those in office to turn back this total abortion ban, to restore the ability for women to make their own decisions about their own body, and importantly, as governor, to veto the bad ideas that I guarantee you are coming down the pipe, like this one, checking the travel documents of women of childbearing age before they're allowed to leave the state of Texas, or one that the House Freedom Caucus has already proposed on their letterhead, you all have reported on this, where they are going to go after employers in the state of Texas who fund the out-of-state travel of their female employees who just want to be able to make their own healthcare decisions for themselves, their future, and their families. We'll be able to stop the bad stuff. We'll be able to do a lot of really good things, but critical to getting that done is winning this election.
We've got Greg at Fox.
Yeah, hey, Beto,
Hi, Greg.
Greg Rugen, good to see you again. I thought a lot about this question because I want it to be fair. Because you and I, we both grew up in largely Catholic communities. And Catholics are taught one thing, and they're torn. How do you convince them to go against, at least on the larger choice issue, what they're taught by their faith leaders?
I appreciate this question. I mentioned that number earlier, that 82% of Texans oppose this total abortion ban, and 76% of them are Republicans. But there are also a lot of Catholics, a lot of Jews, a lot of Muslims, a lot of atheists, a lot of people who run the gamut of faith and religion and belief, of immigration status, of partisanship, of geography. This is one of the few truly unifying issues in the state of Texas right now. As you know, I was born and raised Catholic, baptized, confirmed. My mom is as Catholic as they come. And when we have this conversation at the dinner table, when I remind her that we lead so much of the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality, when we are number one in the country, not just for the rate of teen pregnancy, but repeat teen pregnancy, when we talk about the women in our lives, whether it is her daughters my daughter, the people that I want to serve as the governor of the state of Texas, we can come to the same conclusion, that we want to make sure that we trust the freedom, the will, and the choices the women of this state make. Most of us, nearly all of us in Texas, regardless of our differences, can agree with that much. The only way, though, to make sure that we can do that is to win this election in November.
So we've got ABC 13 over there. You want to jump in? And if not, we've got Sam at the Houston Chronicle back there as well.
Yes, I want to make sure Elizabeth has a chance to answer this question.
In response to that, I would like to let people know here that I was raised by evangelical conservatives. We went to church every Sunday throughout the week, and I even went through a private Christian school education. So I received the whole religious gamut. When my parents saw me going through this situation, they had a lot of trouble grappling with the issue that I was making the decision to pursue an early induction for other people that would be considered an abortion. The fact of the matter is that if you are a Christian, you understand that God gives you the right to free will, to choose whether or not you want to go down a path of righteousness or go down the path of the secular life. If you accept that premise as a Catholic, as a Christian in general, then you understand that this is a choice between a woman and God. Every Christian will understand and accept the premise that it's God's final judgment and that we shouldn't be turning to state secular law to ensure that judgment is delivered before that woman's final day. So that's the message that I would give to individuals who ask about the morality of this within a religious scope. God grants us free will. If you accept that premise, then you accept that this is between a woman and her God.
I just want to say different religions have different ways to handle this. I have a lot of Catholic patients who believe that fertilization is when a child starts, but for Judaism, it's when the baby takes the first breath. I'm Jewish. Is the state going to legislate how I practice my religion? I thought we had this amazing thing called the First Amendment. Just a question. I'd also like to buy champagne before noon on Sunday. Thank you.
I had a question for you, Doctor. I had a question for you.
Yes. Sorry.
The biggest question we're getting is the difficult decision in terms of when to terminate the baby if the mother's life's at risk. There's a lot of confusion with that. What are you hearing from doctors about this law? Governor Abbott said on our network, KG11 News, that the Supreme Court's ruling addresses that and that you have to save the mother's life, but there's still some confusion about that, and doctors are resistant and confused.
Yeah, they're resistant and confused. That's the answer. And it changes daily. So first we had SB 8, then we had Roe v. Wade turned down. Now we have the trigger law, and the trigger law is, I don't even know, $100,000 and life in prison. Doctors are scared of lawsuits. We don't know how to read legal documents. Just ask any doctor that's ever made a bad financial decision. That was also a joke. We don't know how to read stuff, and we get scared of legal paperwork. So this is such a great way to scare doctors and hospital systems. And there's just a ton of confusion. Some hospitals are doing a good job of setting up ethics departments, ethics committees. So you heard this patient's story where an ethics committee got together and allowed her to have an induction of the 18-week baby. That was not viable. But if it goes hospital to hospital, and then what I'm seeing is if you're an insured patient who's educated and has a private doctor, your hospital system will take care of you. If you don't meet those criteria that I just described, if you're poor, less educated, uninsured, and you're showing up at an emergency room bleeding, it's very disorganized. And people are going to die. Women are going to die. It is disorganized. And we cannot, some of these decisions are life and death. When I had my baby, I also broke my water, and I was in labor, and I knew something was wrong, and I turned to the OB-GYN and I said, let's go. And we went and got a stat C-section. Turned out that my placenta had abrupted, which is a fancy word for the placenta sheared off, and my baby wasn't getting any oxygen. I could have died from the blood loss, and my daughter could have died from not getting any blood and oxygen. My doctor had about 1 minute to make that decision. Are we going to have an ethics committee meet if it was earlier? These are life and death decisions. And doctors are scared, disorganized, and have no idea what the laws are.
Doctor, I also wanted to ask you, how does the recent EMTALA ruling in Lubbock kind of impact not only doctors, uncertainty of when to perform something, but also how does the hospital go from there? How do you, act? How do you decide?
So I heard a tiny bit about that, but it was literally yesterday and my kids had school. So
Right. Yeah.
we're busy. We have lives. It basically says that if the mother's life is in jeopardy, you can provide the abortion.
The court ruled that
The court ruled
you don't
against
have
it.
to provide it anymore. Yeah.
Right.
But now they said they don't have to.
Yeah, Texas is suing to not have to provide
And
it.
right now the
Court
see, that happened yesterday. How am I supposed to keep? I'm not a professional politician.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a practicing doctor and a mommy. Like, it's very busy. I see like 25 patients a day. They message me nonstop, and I'm answering calls, and I have 2 small children I'm taking care of, and I have my own health problems. Like, it's really, really hard. I am one of the most politically with it doctors there is, and I have no idea what the court ruling said yesterday. That's terrifying. It's terrifying. If we're not going to value the mother's life, that's just terrifying. And a judge in Lubbock is going to determine how I practice medicine? And then it's going to change lawsuit by injunction by lawsuit? This is what we're going to do now? How do you think people are going to keep up with this? How?
Beto. Yeah.
As governor of Texas, would you allow for any restriction on abortion, including an up to partial birth abortion?
Here's the way that I approach this issue. Listening to Dr. Barelli, Dr. Kumar, these extraordinary women who have just shared their stories. I trust women and their doctors to make their decisions about their body, about their health care, and about their future. I think that is the best, smartest, most constitutional and most American and most Texan approach to this issue. And that's the way that I would approach it.
We're gonna go over here.
You got Houston, San Antonio, all the major cities, you got them in the bag. But the rural community and the Latino community, especially on the border, are turning conservative, they're voting Republican. How are you gonna get those guys to turn? And also, too.
Yes. I'll tell you, we were in Quanah, Texas, doing a town hall meeting, pretty rural part of the state. And as you know, every town hall, anyone can ask a question, make a criticism, say anything they want. And this gentleman named Kevin made the mistake of standing up and telling the women in the room what they should do with their bodies. A woman stood up in response to Kevin and talked about what she called a spontaneous abortion that she had. Was planning a family, very much wanted to have that child. Something happened in her body that she could not control that would be prosecuted under this law in the state of Texas that would force doctors to make a decision that might cost them their very freedom for the rest of their lives. I find in the most rural Republican as well as in the most urban blue parts of the state that there is no issue more unifying than respecting and protecting the freedom of Texans to make their own choices about their own body. And that includes the Rio Grande Valley and Laredo and where we are today, the most diverse city in the United States of America. Como gobernador, yo voy a confiar en las mujeres para hacer sus propias decisiones sobre sus cuerpos, sobre su salud, sobre su futuro. Es algo que tenemos el apoyo de republicanos, demócratas, también de independientes en el estado de Texas.
Got time for
Beto,
more questions.
She's trying to.
It's okay.
sorry,
It's
she's
okay.
been
Doctor,
behind you.
this is a question for one of the physicians, if possible. Are you able to speak with us at all about the calls or concerns that you've received from patients in the days or hours, I guess, leading up to today? What that has looked like for you all?
Yeah, sure. So I would say, I've been providing abortion care in Texas for 7 years now, so this is not new. I think anytime we've had any restriction on abortion pass, any court decision that's been made, people call and they're confused and asking questions. Their main concern is they're pregnant and they need not to be. And so they're asking where they can go for help, where they can get information, where they can get resources. So I think in this landscape, a year into SB 8, having Roe overturned, the Dobbs decision, The trigger ban is just another layer that's adding to that. People are still confused. They're not sure where they can go for care, and they're asking questions about that. And so we're continuing to see that. And our answers are they can certainly come into the clinic, they can have an ultrasound, we can help them get information, but ultimately, if they need an abortion, they're going to have to go out of state.
Sure. Yes.
And I just want to add to that, as a patient who has been really worried about accessing their methotrexate and getting their medication, that I genuinely need to not go blind and that I need to function every day. It's a serious concern, and people in several states that have abortion laws, trigger laws going into effect, are seeing issues with trying to get their medication. And there was a Washington Post article recently where a woman she was in her 40s, I believe, and she was having to go get her tubes tied in order to get her methotrexate, even though she was infertile and she wasn't planning on having children. And it's a very serious issue for patients, and yeah, that's just what I would add to that.
So one of our speakers earlier mentioned the fact that for some women, and I met one in Fort Worth who also has severe arthritis, could not get a prescription, had to go to California to get a prescription. We just saw someone in the liberal hotspot of Cleburne, Texas, who no longer had a fetus that was viable, could not get a doctor here to help her, had to travel out of state to be able to do that. In those instances, I think it's really important that we recognize that many, many women in the state of Texas will not have the resources or the freedom or the ability to travel out of state to literally seek this life-saving health care. What we see in Texas today under Greg Abbott is an attack on women, on their health care, on their very lives, and especially those at the lower end of the economic spectrum. Those working $7.25 an hour jobs, 2 or 3 of them in order to get by. So I just want to make sure that we understand and center those who are going to be most harmed and who are most likely to lose their lives because of this.
Great. We've got one last question. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mariko from NHK, the Japanese Public TV, and I have a question for Elizabeth and also you.
Okay, I'll allow Elizabeth to go first.
Oh, but you too. So thank you. So for Elizabeth, closer together.
Sure.
Yeah. So for Elizabeth, I think you just lost your child, and it should be a very tough story to tell. But why did you decide to speak it out in public? And also I have a question for Vito. So why did you decide to have her here today? And also, do you think you can flip some Republican supporters to push abortion issue as a core campaign agenda? Thank you.
So I decided to speak out because it's one thing to experience this type of loss and trauma, but it's another thing to experience this type of loss and trauma and also be educated on the tangible consequences and implications of these types of policies and laws. As a political scientist, I know the real and tangible ripple effects that these broad and vaguely written laws are going to have on people's lives. And with that knowledge, I understood that I had a responsibility to use the education that I had received and be able to vocalize the urgency and blow the whistle on this issue that's happening now. One of the biggest reasons that really kind of got me into deciding to put a name and a face to this issue is that one of my professors, when I was studying media and politics, had told us that there is a tendency for individuals to read articles by journalists, like you guys, when you report on anonymous sources. They believe that when you say an anonymous source has reported on a certain issue, they believe that you're making up that story out of thin air. That you decided to create a source in order to manipulate the population at large and get them to go with some political agenda that you have underlying. But the actuality of the fact is, those anonymous sources are real. And in order for me to fight that type of pushback, that disbelief, I knew that I had to put a face and a name. From my personal experience, when people tell me, and they don't know who they're talking to, when they tell me that I did wrong for supporting abortion, or I should feel bad for supporting baby killers, when they hear my story, when they see my name, when they see my face, all of a sudden, I'm sorry for your loss. How can I fix this? You can fix this by coming to the polls in November and voting for women's rights. And not just that, for health and safety of all Texans, because it is important that we understand this election is not about partisan identification. This election is about health and safety in regards to our women and their civil liberties, health and safety in regards to the lives that were lost when our electrical grid failed, and the future lives that will be lost when our electrical grid fails again. And then on top of that, the health and safety of our children that we send to school when school shootings are on the rise and are just a commonplace anomaly in our society at this point. This is not just about me. It's about all women, all children, all Texans. Thank you.
You asked why I invited Elizabeth to address you and share her story. We had a town hall meeting about a month ago in Ireland, and as we do at all town hall meetings, I speak a little bit, and then we have a second microphone, and we turn it over to anybody who wants to share anything, ask any question, level any criticism my way. And usually these are fairly raucous events. We have 1,400 people, right? And folks grow impatient, they want to ask their question. Elizabeth asked for it, we gave her the microphone, not knowing what she was going to say. She shared her story at length, with a level of detail that was truly painful and moving and compelling to hear. You could hear a pin drop in that room. Everyone's attention, everyone's focus, everyone's empathy, this extraordinary human capacity we have to imagine ourselves in someone else's shoes. She drew that forth, and she was able to break us out of a statistic or a number or a policy or a law or even politics, as important as this election is, and politics being so fundamental to the change that we need. Every single person in that room and every single person who heard her and watched her was moved and saw it as she experienced it. That's what we need right now. We all need to understand what the true cost of this decision is. This decision that Greg Abbott made a year ago to sign the most restrictive abortion law in the country, with no exception for rape, no exception for incest. A governor who promised, when asked by one of you what he was going to do about the fact that rape victims were now going to be forced to carry their rapist child, and he said, don't worry about it, we will eliminate rape in the state of Texas. More women have been raped in this state than any other state in the union on his watch. The ability to bring perpetrators to justice has declined by half on his watch. There are more than 3,000 untested rape kits at DPS headquarters in Austin on his watch right now. The only way through this is to defeat him, but also to understand who is bearing the brunt of this attack on the women here in Texas. Last thing that I want to say is I want to express my gratitude for Elizabeth, for Claire, for Dr. Barelli, for Dr. Kumar, for Leslie, for being here and sharing their stories. Very moving to me. I hope it was for you and for your viewers and your readers and your listeners. These are the true Texas heroes. This is Texas right here in this room. Texas is not the cruelty, the incompetence, the chaos that you see from Greg Abbott. Texas is so much bigger and better than all of that. I said earlier that I think there's cause for hope in remembering where we were 50 years ago and how we overcame that through the leadership of Texas women. The last hopeful message that I want to share with you is that we're going to win this election because of the people who are with us and the millions more outside of this building across the 254 counties of Texas. You all saw what happened in Kansas, a state that Donald Trump won by a far greater margin than he did right here in Texas, a state that saw in the middle of the summer on a referendum issue near presidential election turnout levels, where some hoped that maybe a pro-choice position would squeak by a thin margin, and instead it won by 60-40. So to your question about Republicans, yes, Republicans, yes, independents, yes, Democrats, yes, the 7 million who were eligible to but did not vote in our elections in 2020 right here in Texas, all of them will be showing up to vote to support a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. We are going to win this election. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for everything you said. Appreciate it. Again, thank you.